London, 1381. Flames lick the summer sky as a 14-year-old king rides out to confront a rebel army. Richard II, crowned at age 10, now stands alone before tens of thousands of angry peasants. The city is on the brink of anarchy, but in this charged moment, the boy king does the unthinkable. He steps towards the mob and cries out, "You shall have no captain but me." The sea of commoners falls quiet, stunned by the youth's nerve. Amazingly, they obey. With nothing but his courage and charisma, Richard leads the rioters out of chaos and back toward peace. It's a victory snatched from the jaws of disaster, and it makes Richard II a legend. Yet as the dust settles, the young king's mercy turns to wrath. Once the crowds disperse, Richard breaks his promises of reform and hunts down the rebellion's ringleaders. "Rustics you were, and rustics you are still," he declares, vowing, "As long as we live, we will strive to suppress you." The rebels who moments ago hailed him now face grim punishment. The heroic boy of London reveals a darker side, convinced that God's anointed ruler must never show weakness. It is the opening act of Richard II's tumultuous reign, a reign that will soar to dramatic heights and plunge to devastating lows. How did the saviour of the crown become its worst enemy? The answer lies in the restless years that followed, as power, pride and betrayal played out to their fateful conclusion. Born in 1367, Richard of Bordeaux was never supposed to rule so soon. When his father, the Black Prince, died in 1376, young Richard became heir to King Edward III. The following year, at just 10 years old, he was crowned King of England. The child monarch was surrounded by powerful uncles, such as John of Gaunt, and a council that governed in his name. England was in the middle of the 100 Years' War. Plagues and taxes had already pushed the country to the edge. And in 1381, a new poll tax triggered mass unrest that exploded into the Peasants Revolt. Richard's response during the revolt was a moment of bravery, but the way he crushed it after winning their trust left a mark. From that day on, Richard believed he alone had the divine right to rule, and that mercy was a sign of weakness. It was a belief that would grow stronger and more dangerous. After 1381, Richard increasingly favoured a small circle of advisors and friends, shutting out older, more experienced nobles. Among them were Michael de la Pole, Robert de Vere, and his tutor, Simon Burley. These men became extremely powerful, and many nobles saw them as unworthy upstarts. Richard's heavy spending, disregard for Parliament, and arrogance had growing resentment at court. By 1386, the kingdom was sliding into crisis again. Parliament, alarmed by failures in war and corruption, demanded reforms, but Richard refused. He told them not even a kitchen servant would be removed at their request. His defiance triggered a backlash, and in 1387, a group of powerful nobles known as the Lords Appellant raised troops and accused Richard's favourites of treason. They included his uncle Thomas of Woodstock, the Earls of Warwick and Arundel, and his cousin Henry Bolingbroke. When Richard's loyalists tried to stop them, they were defeated in battle. In 1388, the merciless Parliament condemned and executed many of the king's closest allies, and Richard was left isolated and humiliated. At just 21, his authority had been broken. But Richard wasn't done. In 1389, now 22, he reasserted control. He promised modernisation, dismissed his enemies with grace, and ruled more wisely, or at least on the surface. Over the next few years, he restored peace with France, made a royal match by marrying the young Isabella of Valois, and lowered taxes. England was stable again. Many thought Richard had matured, but behind the scenes, he was waiting. In 1397, Richard finally made his move. With old threats now relaxed, he turned on the Lords Appellant. He had his uncle, Gloucester, arrested and sent to Calais, where he was murdered, likely on Richard's orders. Arundel was executed, Warwick was exiled. Parliament, stacked with Richard's supporters, gave full backing to this purge. For the king it was justice, for the nobility it was terrifying. Richard now ruled with no limits. He imposed heavy fines, bypassed Parliament, and used forced loans to fund his lavish lifestyle. He silenced opposition, rewarded loyalists, and began to believe he could act without consequence. Among those loyalists were Henry Bolingbroke and Thomas Mowbray, two former rebels who had become allies, but they soon fell out. When Bolingbroke accused Mowbray of treason, Richard took an unusual step. Instead of letting them fight a duel, he banished both men. Bolingbroke was exiled for 10 years, Mowbray for life, and it shocked everyone. Then in 1399, Bolingbroke's father, John of Gaunt, died. Bolingbroke should have inherited his estates, but instead Richard seized them for the crown, and this was a fatal mistake. With Richard away campaigning in Ireland, Bolingbroke returned from exile. He claimed he wanted only his inheritance, but nobles and even commoners rallied to his side. Richard's tyranny had made him enemies everywhere. One by one, castles and cities surrendered to Bolingbroke, and even Richard's regent, Duke of York, defected. Richard rushed home to find a country no longer his. He was captured at Flint Castle and brought to London as a prisoner. There was no battle, there didn't need to be, as Richard had already lost. In September 1399, under pressure from Bolingbroke and Parliament, Richard abdicated his throne. He admitted defeat, said he was unworthy to rule, and handed over the crown to his cousin. Henry Bolingbroke became King Henry IV. Richard was sent to Pontefract Castle, and there, in early 1400, he died mysteriously. Most believe he was starved to death on Henry's orders. Why all this matters? Well, Richard II was not the first English king to be deposed, but his fall was the most dangerous. It showed that even a king appointed by God could be removed by Parliament and public support. That idea shook the monarchy to its core. His deposition started a new royal line, the House of Lancaster, and created tensions that would boil over into the Wars of the Roses decades later. But Richard's story is more than just politics. It's the story of a boy who bravely faced a mob, only to become a man who pushed his kingdom to rebellion. It's about how early success can breed arrogance, how loyalty can be lost, and how power without trust leads to ruin. Richard II's fall reminds us that even a crown can't protect you from the consequences of your choices.